Hey guys, Andy42 here, and this is a completely new tutorial style because we are actually not using our framework for this. I've played a lot of Half-Life ALYX in the last couple of days, and I'm really impressed from this radial menu you see in the video right here. I did quite some research and I thought, hey, this would be really fun to recreate inside of Unreal. So let's dive right in. First of all, we are going to create a new project with the default virtual reality preset from Unreal. And I have prepared two meshes. One is for the background and one is this ring. So it's basically really just a cylinder for the background and a ring. So nothing fancy here. I will also share this on our Discord channel with you. Let's start by creating a new material for both of those meshes. And this will be a very simple unlit material. I picked the color from the actual video. And now I'm going to multiply it by a glow parameter I created. This way we can later animate the glow effect once we hover over it. I'm going to use the radial gradient inside of Unreal and make a parameter for the density. You could of course also use a texture for this, but if you create it inside of the engine, you are much more flexible later on. So I'm going to remap the values here a little bit to actually change the look and feel of the alpha I'm creating. And I'm making a parameter for the min opacity. This will also later be animated once I hover over the mesh or if it's appearing or disappearing. So now you can see we have a nice radial gradient on the plane. Let's change it to be translucent and drag this into our opacity channel. And this is the result. It's not one-to-one like in the video, there are more effects in there, but for a starting position I think this is fine for now. So let's apply this to both of our meshes and start off by creating a new blueprint. So this will be our master button where all the logic is in there. So I imported both of my meshes. And I also created a trigger. This one will be later used for the hovering effect and even for the selection effect of the weapon you have. So let's start off by creating a dynamic material instance for both of my static meshes. And we assign this material, create a new variable out of this, call it dynamic material. And we will assign this newly created material to both of my meshes, so they share the same dynamic material, and if we animate one of them, both of them will change accordingly. Okay, let's create a new custom event for the appear effect and also one for the disappearing effect. Right now we will just make a simple delete actor for the disappearing, but we will change this later on to be more similar to the actual effect from Half-Life. Okay, at the beginning I want to set the actor scale to 0, so it's actually hidden once it starts, and now I'm going to animate the scale of the actor with a timeline component. Let's change the disappearing effect a little bit. So for the disappearing, I want to play the reverse appear animation. And once it is finished, I want to actually, if it's backwards, destroy the actor. So the next thing would be to actually change the actor's 3D scale. And we lerp a vector between 0 and 1. Let's open up the timeline, create a new lerp float and give it some values. So in this case it's 0, 0 and 0.51. I'm going to change this values later on. But this is the speed, how fast the actor is appearing. So let's connect both of them and put the lerp into the alpha. And now if I hit play, you can see it scaling up. Okay, this is already working. Let's have a look into the actual video. So we can really have a close look on what is happening here, frame by frame. You can see the button at the center, the one with the hand, is actually the first that's spawning. The others are scaling up. There's not really an order to it, but they are scaling up really fast. So it's like 3 or 4 frames. So it's barely noticeable. So let's go in the timeline again and change the timing a little bit to be much faster. And this looks much closer. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to start here is the hovering effect. So once a component is overlapping my trigger here, I want a little hover effect so it scales bigger. I'm also going to use a timeline for this. It's basically the same setup I did for the appear animation. So let's copy both of those nodes here. So let's connect the flow to my alpha, and I'm going to change the scale of the actor from 1 to 1.1. So it's just a little bit bigger if I hover over it. And of course, if I end the overlap here, I want to reverse the animation so the actor gets to its normal scale again. Okay, let's get a simple gun mesh in here. That's a very simple mesh. I modified a little bit and it's a simple gun. I'm creating a new material for it. It's also translucent and unlit. With the color, I use a Fresnel effect here. Also change the values again and plug all of this into my opacity. So I have a very simple white material here. Let's add the static mesh to the button. So this will be our preview mesh. I'm going to assign my material to it. And you can see it's already looking kind of like in Half-Life. So the next thing would be to actually create a child, but to not be confused, I'm going to change this to be a cube. So I know this one is my master, the one I should not use in the game, and the other ones will be my actual buttons I want to use in the game. So let's create a child from my master and call it button gun. We open it up and change the preview mesh to not be the cube, but in this case the gun. Let's also add a text rendering for the ammo count. There's one for the ammo count current and another one for the ammo count max. Let's also change the alignment, the text itself, and the scale of the text to fit on the mesh. It's not the right font right now, it's the basic Unreal font I'm using here, but we may change this later on because the one in Half-Life is much more lighter than this one. But for now, let's keep it this way. I'm also going to change the material of the text renderer, because the second number in Half-Life is translucent. So the small number here. And this is not possible with the default text material from Unreal. So I'm going to search it. It's in my engine folder. And let's copy it into our ALYX folder here and open it up. And we only need to do some changes here. So first of all, let's make it translucent and also unlit again. The next step would be to plug the vertex color into our emissive color and multiply the texture from the font with our alpha from the material. So now I can change the alpha from the text. Let's assign the newly created material to the text. You can already see, okay, now it's unlit. And if I select the ammo count total and open up the text render color, I can now change the alpha. So let's decrease it. And have a look at the reference again. You can also see this is being animated once it is hovered, so we need to do this later on. We don't need to change the backside or to make it two-sided because we always see it from front. It's always rotating to the player. So let's create another child blueprint class, this time for the hand. But there's only a skeletal mesh in there. We need a static one, so I'm going to open the skeletal one and press the Make Static Mesh button. So this way Unreal creates a new static mesh with the hand here, and this is the one I'm going to use for my hand button. So let's assign the hand here and scale rotate it the way it looks in Half-Life. Also, this is not the perfect hand because you can see all the joints. It's more like a mechanic hand here. So you may want to change this to another hand model. But for now, I wanted to work with the assets from the template. Now it's time to actually create the quick selection menu itself. So this will be the parent object that is holding all the child actors. I'm going to create a new child actor. In this case, it's my button hand. And here I'm also assigning my hand button here. And now you can see, okay, this is the base button at the center. I'm doing the same for the gun. And also assign the right class here and move it up. And the last one will be for a tool. I imported a very simple tool. It's our measuring tool. It's much too simple for the one I needed, but this was the one I had in mind here. So let's create a new child blueprint again, the last one for today, and add this tool mesh here. Let's have a look at the reference again. to see how the tool is looking there. And you can see it's straight at the bottom. So I'm going to change this. And place it down at the bottom. Okay, the next thing you can see here are the arrows, and they are actually very simple. So I went into Substance Designer and create a very simple arrow. You can of course just use other textures. I will also provide the materials I use on our Discord server. So you can use the same assets I used here and really follow along with the tutorial here. So here I'm just wanted to see how it looks tiled. Going to change the scaling a little bit because I only need one. I'm changing the scaling in the engine later on. So that's the reason I'm only going to export this one arrow here. Okay, let's import them into Unreal and create a very simple material for them. They are not animated and they don't react on the hovering. They only change in the appear animation. So this material will be quite simple. And let's have a look at the appear animation. So here in slow-mo you can really see they scale up a little bit, but independent from all the other buttons. So it's not connected to the hand buttons, it's not connected to the other buttons here. It's really scaling from the center, but independent. So in order for this to work, we are going to create a scene component. This will be the group for all three of the arrows here. And we are going to change the scale of this scene component a little bit in the appear animation. So this will be the new pivot point for all of our arrow meshes, and the meshes themselves will be just a simple plane. So we're going to change the scale of it and also the position. And if you like the tutorial and you want to continue with the series, it would be awesome if you subscribe to our channel, so you can see once we upload new tutorials for the series here. So the plane is in place now. Let's change the material, because as you can see in the reference, we want to have 2 different arrows. So we are going to change the tiling a little bit. I'm going to break off the UV coordinates, multiply this one here by 2 and make it a float 2 again. So it's only tiling on one direction, not on both of them. And now I have my 2 arrows here. Let's change the material again to be unlit and also translucent. And we're going to add a simple color. It's not pure white, it's a little yellowish. So let's add this to our emissive color. I also want to create this remap value range node here and a max opacity parameter. This way I can change and animate the opacity, because if you look closely, once the arrows appear, you can see they fade in a little bit. And if they disappear, they fade out. So I want to recreate this effect here. Here you can see they are not visible at all, and then they animate to be fully visible. So let's do the same here. I'm going to copy the same color, but increase the value of it. Okay, this is everything we need to do for our basic arrow material here. So once the actual arrows are positioned right, let's create this small scaling effect. So we are going to open up the event graph again, create a new custom event, and we will also use a timeline for this. But let's see what values we should put in there. So let's try it out in our viewport here. And you can see we don't really have that much space here. So we can maybe play with values like 0.9 to 1. So let's work with these values here. And by now, I'm sure you will be quite familiar with this approach. So nothing fancy in here, just replicate the steps we did before. And the next thing would be to create a dynamic material. But first of all, let's see how the effect is looking. And if you look up close, you can really see it's scaling independently, but it's really, really fast. So let's have a look in slow-mo. So I think the speed is fine, but we need to add this transparency lerp in there. So I'm going to copy the name because I will need it later on here. But first of all, we need to create the dynamic material again. We will assign the same material and also create a dynamic material out of this so we can use it later on. And you also want to do it at the begin play, so you will only do this once and you can reuse the material in the game at runtime. And now I want to use the very same timeline to change the actual scalar parameter max opacity. And we are also lerping in this case. I don't want full opacity, so I only lerp to 0.75. And I'm also going to change the value in A to 0 later on. But let's try this out. So this is much too fast to see, so I'm going to change the duration so you can really see what is happening here. And now you can see how it's really changing the transparency and moving along. But of course in the game it's much faster, so let's change this again. I also don't want to have an immediate start, so I want a little delay here, so not everything is happening at once. And now you can see this nice little effect here. And I want to change the scale of the ring itself. So the ring is a little tricky because I'm not quite sure how the system works. I think the actual selected mesh is highlighted with the ring, but it's not always the case. So I'm not quite sure how this is working. Maybe I need to do more research and play Half-Life again. So I really love my job. Okay. Just trying around with the timing a little bit to get the effect right. And in this case, I'm also going to lerp the vector. Okay, this is working nicely here. So I think from the artist side, everything is already there, what we're needing. We need to tweak the hover effect a little bit and maybe the background texture edit in there. There's one very little detail. The ring itself is rotating, so there's one little part at the top of the mesh that is a little bit bigger, and that's the reason you can see this ring is actually rotating in Half-Life. So I'm modifying the topology a little bit and see how it is moving, and I'm going to change the resolution of the mesh later on to be much smoother, because in this case the menu is right before the eyes of the VR user, so it should really be very smooth in this case. I'm using the rotating movement component to rotate the actual mesh, but it's very important that you auto register update component set it to false, because we only want to rotate this ring here on the x-axis. And if you don't check this box to off, everything will rotate. So here at the begin play, I'm going to tell it exactly what component I want to update and to rotate. So in this case, it will be our ring. And this way, only the ring is being rotated by the rotating movement. So if I hit simulate, you can see here it is turning. It's turning in the wrong direction. So I'm going to reverse it. And also here you can see that it's not high poly enough. But you can already see this very small effect here. So let's open up Maya again. Let's move the mesh out. And here you can see the effect of the ring rotating. Okay, the last thing would be to actually change the rotation of the menu to always face the player's camera. So we use a find look at rotation node for this, and we need a variable for the player cam. I started off with an actor, but I'm going to change this to be a camera component later on. So first of all, I want to check with a validated get if this variable is already set. If so, I can set the rotation, but if not, I want to first get it. So I want to get actors of class and search for my pawn I'm using. In there is this camera component. Let's get it and set this variable. So here now I have to change the type to be a camera component. And don't worry that this is in the tick, because this will only happen once. Once this is set, it will never be executed again. And this is a very safe approach because it's searching as long as it is not finding the player. So now that the player is found, we can use the camera and get its location and also get the location of the actual actor here. And calculate the rotation we need. In this case, the rotation will be rotated 180 degrees. So I need to break up my result. And I'm going to add 180 degree on the Z-axis to fix the rotation. I could also just created the buttons facing the other way, but this fix is faster now in this case. So let's do it this way. And now if I play in VR, you can see it is working. The other effect is also already working. The menu is facing the camera all the time. So the next things would be to actually go in there and create some functionalities for this. So if you like this tutorial and you want me to create the next part and also other mechanics from Half-Life ALYX here, please like the tutorial and hit the subscribe button. Thanks and see you in the next tutorial.